So good morning, friends. Today's video, today's class, we will see how to use Flume and ingest data into HDFS. Okay, and Flume is a tool which can actually get data from weblogs, and you can ingest to any source. So if you go to Flume user guide, as we have seen with Scoop and Hive, here also we have to look into Flume user guide. And if you go to the Flume user guide, and if you scroll down, this is the architecture. So Flume runs as an agent, so you can start as many Flume agents as you want, and each agent has to be configured with source, channel, and sync. So the source can be a web server, or it can be many other things. If you go to the documentation, if you scroll little bit down, you can see the Flume sources here. So it can read data from Avro, it can read data from Thrift servers, it can run a particular command. Exec source means execute a particular command and keep on getting the output of that command. It can get from JMS, you can get it from spooling directory source, you can get it from Twitter, Kafka, Netcat, Sequence, etc. So there are many sources from where you can get the data. So when it comes to source, it's all about connecting to the source, okay? And channel is the one which will aggregate the messages. So you will get n number of messages from the web server. You have to aggregate those things and send it as one group. If you keep on sending one message at a time, then it will not be very efficient. You will be wasting a lot of resources. Hence, in most of these real-time integration tools, typically data will be aggregated, and aggregated in the sense group the n number of messages or up to a particular memory threshold, and then it will try to push that group or aggregated messages to the sync. So channel is the one which will define the rules to group the messages, and sync is the one which will actually take the messages from the channel, and then again there can be a number of syncs. If you go here, you can see you can use HDFS sync to store data to HDFS. You can use Hive sync, you can use the Avro sync, which will just create Avro files. You can use HBase, you can even sync to Kafka. So there are many things which can work. As part of this class, I will only cover Logger sync and HDFS sync for the syncs. And when it comes to sources, I will only cover Netcat and exec source. So these two are the things which will be covered for sources and syncs, HDFS and Logger. And then channel, there are many types of channels. You can have a memory channel, you can have JDBC channel, and I will be covering only memory channel and file channel. These two are the things which will be covered as part of the course. So now when you have Flume installed, you will not have anything, you will just have the Flume binaries, okay? And these Flume binaries has to be there wherever you want to run the Flume. It could be on the gateway node where it has access to the web server, the source web server. It could be on the source web server, and when it is on source web server, that has to be designated as client. Then only it can get the data from the web server and push it into Hadoop. If you want to use Hadoop as sync, either you have to have it in the gateway node, where gateway node already know your Hadoop cluster and HDFS, but it should be able to access the web logs from the web server. Or you can also have the agent on the source web server itself, but it need to have the binaries and other configurations to act as client to Hadoop. Or you can have somewhere in the middle, you can have a designated server for Flume agents, which have access to both the web server and also acts as client to HDFS. So we'll be using the first option, where our gateway node will be running these Flume agents. Okay, and so unless you start the Flume agents, there will be nothing that will be running on the on anything for Flume. So I'm connecting to the our lab. Okay, so here you can see, you can run ps-ef grep Flume. So there are a few programs that are already running by some other people. So you can have as many Flume agents as you want, depending upon your applications, to get data from different sources and sync into the target. Here some other users are actually using Flume on this cluster. Okay, so for this we will actually create a directory called flume_demo. Okay, and then I'm getting into flume_demo here, and then 1 minute. Okay, so here to set up the agent, actually the document itself provides the information. If you see here, you have an example conf, and then they're defining sources, sinks, and channels. Okay, and then there are other parameters which you need to take care for source, depending upon the source type you choose, and then for sink, depending upon the sink type you choose, and channel, depending upon the channel type you choose. Okay, for all these things you should be familiar with the documentation. You need not memorize any of these things, you just have to be familiarized with the documentation. For example, if you want to use netcat as source, okay, you can go here and you can see what are the options the netcat provides. So you can define type, you can define bind to IP address, port number, and few others. Netcat is just for experimental purposes. You typically don't use netcat. I just want to show how Flume actually get data using sources, aggregate using channel, and then push to the target using sink. Okay, similarly, if you go here, the sink is of type logger, and if you go to logger sink here, so there are not much parameters here. You just have to give the sink type, and then from what channel we are trying to get the data. So why we have to, once we define source, sink, and source, channel, and sink, we have to link them together. If you go back to the this one, here we are defining the source details, the sink details, channel details, and then we are saying to what channel sources write and from what channel sinks read from. And the reason why we have to do this integration is if you go through different architectures. Okay, let me show you the different architectures here. Yeah, so you can actually have you can set up a Flume using different architectures depending upon the requirements. Whatever I have shown is the simple one. You can also have this multi-agent flow where you define multiple agents for which one agent sink will push data to the another agent source. So in that case, you have to configure both the agents, you have to run both the agents, and then you have to read one agent output from the other agent output, other agent. Okay, and in this case you have to use Avro as the sink. There is no sink for Flume agent, there is only sink for Avro, and Avro is the file format which can be used for the multi-agent flow. So the connector between one agent and the other agent in this serialized multi-agent flow is the Avro sink and Avro source for the next agent. And also when you have a distributed application, your application might be running in different web servers. The same application might be running in different web servers for load balancing purpose. In that case, you have to get the data from multiple web servers. So you have to consolidate data from all the web servers into uh, as one data set into HDFS before loading into HDFS. So in this case, what we can do is we can actually have multiple agents reading data from the web server and then write the output to the Avro, and then using another agent you can consolidate. So this is another type of architecture. So for as that is the reason why they have decoupled the source and source channel as well as sink, as we can read as a channel can. And also I think you can also have like this, you can have one source writing through multiple channels, flushing data to multiple sinks. Similarly, one channel can flush into multiple sinks also. So this is another flow called multiplexing flow, wherein one source is writing through multiple sinks through multiple channels, and again you can actually have a multi-agent flow for from one of the sinks, and again this sink and this source has to be connected through Avro. And in this design, one sink is writing to HDFS, and the sink is writing to JMS, and another sink is writing to the some other Flume agent. So there are multiple permutations and combinations which you can use to set up the data ingestion from the web logs into whatever target you want to push to. That is the reason why they have separated the sources, channels and sinks, and then you have to connect them in whatever way you want to design your the data ingestion framework. Okay, so here it's a simple flow. We have one source, one channel and one sink, and sources and sinks are connected through channel. In this case, the channel is of type memory, and we are actually consolidating, we are defining the capacity and transaction capacity of the channel. And if you go to the documentation, you will understand what is that about. Okay, memory channel, and here capacity means the maximum number of events stored in the channel. Transaction capacity means the maximum number of events the channel will take from a source or give to a sink per transaction. Okay, so these are the definition for capacity and transaction capacity. Capacity means the maximum number of events stored in the channel. So within the channel, how many number of events can be stored at a point in time before pushed to the sink. And transaction capacity is the maximum number of events the channel will take from a source or give to a sink per transaction. At times these two will be same, but typically I think transaction capacity will be smaller than the capacity. Okay, so within the capacity itself, you can divide into multiple transactions by setting transaction capacity less than the capacity. And then there are other things also, whether you want to keep alive, means if this keep alive is to time out the messages. If it cannot process the message within 3 seconds, then it will time out, and you will start seeing the errors in the log files. And then you can also set capacity buffer percentage. So this one will actually define, 1 minute, define the percent of buffer between byte capacity and the estimated total size of all events in this channel. So byte capacity is the one which we need to understand first before getting into the byte capacity buffer percentage. So byte capacity is bytes of memory allowed as a sum of all events in this channel. The implementation only counts the event body, which is the reason for providing. Okay, so if you want to use memory more effectively, depending upon the size of the message and the capacity, you have to define this byte capacity, so that the memory is not either over allocated or under allocated. Okay, and this byte capacity buffer percentage is each message will have metadata also, and by setting byte capacity buffer percentage, you can say what amount of memory should be used for metadata and what amount of memory should be used to actual messages itself. Okay, so anyway, we will actually start creating our first agent. So just you can take this one. Here I am creating a new directory called example. Okay, cd example vi example.conf. Okay, so here now let us understand what is this A1 and other things. So the first one, if you see, this A1 is common across all the lines here. So A1 will be the agent name. When we actually start the agent, we will give the name called A1 to use this configuration, and that is the connector between the agent running with the name A1 and the configuration file, and all the parameters for the all the parameters from the configuration file. And then sources, sinks, and channels are just keywords. You have to give the name of sources by saying by giving like this. You can give multiple sources if you want to run one agent reading from multiple sources. It's not required that one agent has to read from only one source. And then you have to define the properties of each of the source. If you want to give multiple sources or multiple sinks or multiple channels, you just have to give the comma separated. Okay, so you can have R1, R2, R3 as 3 different sources. And then if you see here we start with agent name and the sources. So these parameters are related to sources, and then this is the source name, which is R1. If you have multiple sources R1, R2, R3, and if you want to set the properties for R2, then you have to say sources.r2.type, and whatever parameters that are related to that type you will follow after the type. And there is no need to be in particular order, but typically we will start with the type for the documentation purposes, or for the for our convenience. But from Flume perspective, these properties can be in any order. It does not bother about the order of the properties. So here we are trying to define the type for the source R1. That's what this is, and we are trying to use netcat here. If you want to use exec source, you have to say exec here. If you want to use some other source that is provided as part of the list, you have to provide the type as that the one which you want to use. Okay, so that is about source. Similar is the case with sink. Here you can see a1.sinks. Sinks is nothing but a keyword, and then k1 is the sink name. So it is same as here. And then you have to define the type, and then you can define the subsequent parameters. So all the subsequent parameters is driven by the type. So for each type, the parameter list, the parameter names, and the number of parameters, and at times the meaning of the parameter also might change. Okay, so it's very important for you to refer the documentation when you try to create the Flume agents. Okay, and then the channel. So channel, the name is C1. So we are trying to define properties for channel C1 here within agent A1, and we started with type. Type is memory, capacity, transaction capacity. Okay, and then bind the sources and sink to the channel. In this case, we are trying to bind the source and sink to the channel. So sources is writing to channel C1, and sink K1 is reading from the channel C1. So this is where the source and sink are connected through the channel. That being said, now let us start this. Okay, and if you go a little bit up, they give sample command. Here you have to say uh, bin flumeng agent. So you don't need to specify bin. I think already the flumeng is added to the path. So we can directly use flumeng command. If you want to explore all these different commands, you can use. You can go through the list. And here we will be using we are trying to start the agent. Hence, we have to say flumeng agent, and the name of the agent can be -n or -- name. So each of both of them are aliases to each other, and you can give the name. So -name or -n does mean the same thing, and we have to give a1 here. Whatever the first string we have given before sources, sinks, and channels, that will be the agent name, and one configuration file can be used only for one agent. You cannot have multiple agents using one configuration file. Okay, and then you can define configuration either by saying -c or --conf. Here you can give either full path or absolute path or full path or relative path. Whatever you want to give, you can give. It's always better to use absolute paths rather than using relative paths. Absolute paths are also called as fully qualified path. So here I will be specifying the fully qualified path. So it is home, and then within home I have a directory, and then I have a directory called flume_demo and then example. So this is the directory from which I want to get the configuration. And then if I want to define the file, I can use either -conf file and -f. So here I have given the directory name. You can give the directory also if you have only one configuration file in that. But if you have multiple configuration files within the same directory, then it will confuse which one to use. So in that scenario, you have to say -f to pass the configuration file name also. And here, either you can give fully qualified path or relative path, because we already given the directory location here. So I will be using the either you can use -c, give the directory and -f file name, or directly give -f and give the fully qualified path. Either way it will work. And example.conf and hit enter. Okay, so it is doing something. What it is doing? So if you go to the documentation, here we have defined it as netcat. Netcat is nothing but a web server which will be running on the host name and port number. So when you use Flume agent, it will actually start a small web server which is provided, I think, which will be there from the Linux file system itself, and Flume might be using that one. I'm not 100% sure whether it is part of Flume or it is part of the underlying file system. But the outcome of using netcat is it will actually start a web server, and here we are saying the host name and the port number. So using the host name and port number, it will actually launch a web server. Okay, so now it is started. You can see here the host name is localhost and the port number is 44444. So we can actually go to another tab and log into the CloudX lab. And here you can say telnet. I hope telnet is available here, or telnet is not available. Okay, so I will ask them to install telnet. Unless we have telnet, we will not be able to test it in this case. So let me see. So telnet is the one which can listen from the console. Okay, telnet is the command which can listen on a given host and port number. So there is a web service running on localhost 44444 on this host. So if we have telnet, if we run telnet on that host name and port number, it will launch a command line interface listening to that port number, and you can type to that, and it will be you can interact with the web service that is running. So let me start my own lab. Okay, thank you. NC localhost. Okay, NC is another command, netcat. NC stands for netcat. Thank you, Gopi. I'm not aware of this. So we can use this command, and then we can type whatever that comes to your mind. And then if you come here, it is actually passing those messages to sync. Okay, even the channel is defined as with capacity 100, 1000 and transaction capacity as 100. It is immediately passing the messages, but there is a latency between that. So if there are not many messages for a given point for some time, even though channel capacity is defined as 1000 and transaction capacity is defined as 100, there is a timeout also. I think based on that, it will try to push the messages whatever is there in the channel. Okay, testing Flume. So we got the message. So in this way, so we understood what is source, and why we are getting data here is the sync is logger, and when it comes to sync configuration, okay, what we have done, we just told to log. Okay, so in this case, the logger is as we are using NC command, netcat command, the logger will go to the web service that which this Flume agent have started. So netcat is the web service which the Flume agent is started, and logger will push the data to the same thing. That's why we are getting data back to here. Okay, so the server is started as part of the Flume ng start command. You can see it has created a instance of source type netcat, and then it has created instance of sync k1 type logger, and in the end, within the same session, it actually started the web service. So everything is logged into this one, but in the backend there are multiple things that are running, so that we can validate. Those things are nothing but a web service on port number 44444, and then second one, a Flume agent. You can run Flume agent, or sorry, Flume ng. How come? Let me just start with, let me just get with Flume. Yeah. Okay, so I can actually say ps-fu. Fu is to get all the process running by the user, training 8634 in this case. You can see a Flume example is running here. Okay, and then the netcat service. I think this could be the one. I don't know which one. No, none of these are netcat services. So I think netcat is running as part of the Flume agent itself. Okay. Anyway, this is the end-to-end demonstration of simple Flume agent. So we have started a process. Unless we start the process, there will be nothing for Flume. It's just a bunch of binaries lying around, exactly like Scoop. Scoop also, you have the binaries, and then when you start the Scoop job, it connects to the source, get the data from database using MapReduce, and load data into HDFS. Similarly, the Flume by itself does not have anything. We have to start the agents after configuring the agents, and this is how we can configure the agent. So that being said, now let us see a little bit more complex example. It's again a basic example, but a little bit more complex than this simple netcat one. Okay, so for that you can actually go to my website, CCA Spark and Hadoop Developer Certification course. That includes Flume also. Okay, Gopi is saying something. Cloudex has given a video to trigger Flume. People can see this in that. Okay. You mean Netcat? Okay. Yeah, even I have the videos, so you can. So this is the one in just streaming data using Flume. So you people can follow that and actually uh, um, do this one. But this is not that important. It is just to understand for the explanation purpose. It works well. But to actually define a more proper Flume, no, not this one. Yeah, the same thing have both the cases. Okay, first I have set up the telnet, then running first Flume job telnet to logger, and then integrate data from telnet into HDFS. This is second topic within the Flume itself, and this covers text generated connecting to web server using telnet in HDFS. Okay, we will be integrating data generated using Netcat itself, but the data will be stored into HDFS. The source is same, but the sync will differ. Okay, so these are the parameters which you need to keep in mind for HDFS sync. Okay, the first one is type. The component type name needs to be HDFS, and then you can define the HDFS path, and then there are a bunch of other parameters like file prefix, what should be the prefix for each of the file name, what should be the suffix of each of the file name, and then the batch size and file type. File type, if it is sequence file, then the data will not be in readable format. If you want to store the data in a text file format, then you have to use data stream. If you want to compress the data, you can use compressed stream. So it's up to your choice how you want to configure the sync. Okay, and these are the different parameters which I have used. First one is type, second one is path, third one is file prefix, and also you can use date. So here there are a lot more details. So this is the file prefix, this is the path, this is the role size, this is the role count, role interval, file type is data input stream, and unless you use local timestamp. So if you see here, I'm not directly giving the complete file name. I am using some formats here, date level formats. So percentage y is for year, percentage m is for month, percentage d is for date. So if you want to use different directories and different file prefixes for different time intervals, here you can define the patterns as part of the path and the file prefix, and then you have to set user local timestamp equal to true. If you don't set this, then the local timestamp will not be considered to create the files using these patterns. You will start seeing some weird behavior. Okay, so let's start with the source again. So the source is sorry, it's not Netcat this time. The source is exec. So to run the exec, first we have to generate the logs. So we have to run start logs, which will actually start the generating the logs. I have shown a sample of that as part of the last class. There is a program called gen_logs which will keep on generating the logs. Okay, so we will be using that one. And how we will be reading those logs? Using tail hyphen capital F command, which will be polling the log, and if there are any changes to the in the log, it will read the data. And exec, because we are trying to run a Linux command called tail hyphen F, we are defining the source type as exec. Okay, and so depending upon the source you are trying to read, you have to use different types, and then you might have to pass the type related parameters for whatever type we choose. For exec type, the command one is the most important one, which will actually execute the command as part of the exec type. And then channel, earlier we have seen memory, now we will be seeing file. and the channel capacity is 20,000 and transaction capacity is 1,000. Okay, and then channels checkpoint interval 3,000. So this one is every 3 seconds, sorry, every 30 seconds it will try to perform the checkpoint. Even if you don't get enough capacity, 20,000 and 1,000 to flush to the sink, every 30 seconds it will try to do the checkpoint, and the channel will try to create the push the data to the sink. Okay, and here we are giving the max file size because it is of type file. We are creating a max file size. So even if there is a lot of data being generated, every 2 GB it will try to create a new file. Okay, and then sync is of type HDFS, and I have already explained all these things. And then we have to bind the source and sync with the channel. Okay, why I have twice? Let me see. I think okay, it's a final code, so you can actually copy this entire thing. So here I just broke into pieces, and then I have provided the final code for you for your convenience, so that you can just copy this one. And give whatever name you want. So let me see what name I have given. I have given it as flumeconf, flume.conf. I paste, save it, come out of it, and now we can run this one using this command. Also, this lesson have how to integrate data from Netcat to HDFS also. It's more simpler one, but this is the final one where you can actually get the data from Weblogs into HDFS. Okay, so first I will start the Flume agent, then we will start the logs, so that we don't miss any logs. Already there are some logs that are being generated because we started the logs earlier. Okay, I think it is already started. PS hyphen, yeah, it is already it is not started yet. Sorry. So once we start the agent, then we will start the logs, generation of logs. Okay. So you can just copy this command, paste it here. It will fail because I haven't given the path correctly. So in this case, I am giving I am fixing the directory path, and here let me copy it to the Sublime Text. Okay, so it's training 8634. Flume underscore demo. HDFS underscore demo. So Flume underscore demo. HDFS underscore demo. Actually, I don't need to give this path. Already we have given. So you can be in any directory, as we have given already the configuration directory. Let me see if I have killed this one. We have to kill because the agent name is same. Already an agent with name A1 is running. So that's why we have to kill before we start a new agent with the same name, and hit enter. Now it will start the Flume agent with the name A1. Okay, so here I have to give the complete path. Earlier I thought it was when it comes to, when you already have conf, you don't need to specify the path for the configuration file, but it is not the case. We have to give the path for the configuration file also. But once you define the configuration file, you don't need to specify the conf. So conf and configuration file are kind of mutually exclusive. If you have the configuration file for your agent in a directory, you can either give the directory name, but if you have multiple files, then instead of using conf, use conf file. Okay, if there is any question around this, let me know. I will try to clarify. So conf and conf file are mutually exclusive. So when you have your configuration file in a directory, you can just say conf and it will use the configuration file which is there in that directory. But if you have multiple configuration files in the same directory for different agents, then you have to use conf file and give the actual file location. And if you have both the parameters conf and conf file, then conf file will take the precedence. Okay, now let us see whether it will run or not. Now it is started, but to get the logs, we have to run the start logs command also. So it is complaining a little bit here. Okay, so HDFS path is not correct. So we have to fix the HDFS path in the configuration file. If you see here, it is trying to write to this location, user Cloudera Flume, whereas I cannot write to user Cloudera because my username is training8634. So what you have to do, you have to go to the configuration file here. Open the file, and here instead of Cloudera, we have to specify my username. Okay, now let me try running it. Yeah. Now we started the temp file. If you see this output, it has created a temp file. That temp file will be populated until it decides to write to the final file. Okay, now it is running. So what we have to do is, we have to now start the logs. You can see whether the logs are being generated or not by using tail underscore logs.sh command, and you can see the logs are being generated. Okay, and you can see that it is actually updating the files in the channel, and the channel files are created in my home directory with .flume. There will be a hidden directory with .flume, and then there is a file channel because we are using file channel, and then the data is being written to the this log-2 file. Okay, so it will be writing, and while it is writing, you can open another window. Connect to the cluster and then run Hadoop fs-ls /user /training8634 flume. So this is the directory where I am trying to write the data to. If you see, there is a directory created with today's date because I have the HDFS path as this one. Okay, so it is very important because at times when you try to do the data ingestion, you want to separate the data by date. That is one of the most common design decision which people take while getting data from different sources. Okay, and in that directory, it should have some prefix also, not just date, so that you can have data for different types of sources, but date is more relevant. And if you see, and there is a temp file, and then there is a new a file with the prefix flume and then date prefix, and then a unique number is used to create these files. Okay, and we can actually look into those files also while so already. Okay, 1 minute. Let's see whether it is being updated or not. If you see, even though data is flowing in, it is not getting updated because it haven't reached the thresholds. Once it reaches the thresholds, then only you will see it here. Until then, you will not see. To see how much data is being copied so far, we can go to the hidden directory flume lsltr. So there is file channel directory lsltr. There is data ls-ltr, and as of now only 1 MB data is generated. Why it is not updating? Let me see. Is it running? Yeah, still it is running. So somewhere it is doing something internally which I am not completely aware of. And there is a checkpoint directory also in this, and there are some queues internally maintained. We don't need to worry much about what is the purpose of each of these things. It is primarily for its own purpose. Okay, so once certain thresholds are reached, then only it will actually push to HDFS. Even though we define checkpoint time as 3000 milliseconds, I have to revisit that parameter, whether it is 3000 milliseconds or 3000 seconds. Yeah, I think it's 3000 milliseconds only. I think every 2 minutes it is creating a new file. So let me see the parameters here which we have used. Okay, yeah, so there is a parameter called roll interval, due to which it is actually rolling every 2 minutes. So if you see here, when it comes to HDFS, I am saying roll size is 1 MB, and HDFS roll count is 100 and roll interval as 120. So whenever these parameters are reached, it will automatically rolled. I think every 2 minutes is the quickest one that is happening. I don't think 100 messages are being generated in 2 minutes, and also 1 MB file is generated. If you see, the file size is only 19 KB, and if we open one of the files by using cat command, you can see the messages, and we can actually do wc-l. So it's exactly 100 messages. So the 2 minutes and 100 messages is happening approximately at the same time. Okay, so these three are the parameters which are actually making the rolling to happen. And here channel level 30 seconds is to is at the channel level, and the reason why we are seeing a new file every 2 minutes in HDFS is because of the sync level parameters to roll for roll size, roll count, and roll interval, etc. Okay, so here it's all about channel, and here it's all about sync. So what's happening is, when I run start logs, it is generating some logs, and those logs are being pushed to channel. And in channel, the capacity is defined as 20,000, transaction capacity as 1000, and checkpoint interval as 30 seconds. So whatever happens first, if there is if there are 1000 messages, immediately channel will push it to the file. Okay, file, and also so not to the file but to the sync. And also every 30 seconds, whether there are 1000 transactions or 30 seconds, whichever happens first, the data which is accumulated for that time frame, or the 1000 messages, will be pushed to the sync. In the sync, if you see in the sync, there is a temporary file also. So the data will go to the data will directly go to the temp file. It will not go to the actual file. So the temp file, and using some internal mechanism, it will start accumulating the data, and then it will start pushing it to the or it will actually roll into the actual files. Okay, so now you can see that there is a temp file with 69 is running. If you wait for 2 minutes, it will roll into a different file and new temp file will be generated. You can see it here. So at 127 a new temp file is generated. It's difference between 26 and 27 is definitely less than 2 minutes. The reason is 100 messages which is set as roll count is reached with before 2 minutes. That's why we have started seeing a new file here. Okay, so go through these parameters, very important ones. Typically these will be much bigger than this. The roll size should be 256 MB or 512 MB. Roll count should be typically in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, or sometimes even in millions. And roll interval can be 2 minutes. So on a heavy agent, a 2-minute interval can generate half GB of data, 256 MB of data. So roll interval you can use the same thing, but roll count and roll size you have to understand the behavior, and based on that you have to define those things. Even roll interval, if you are not getting too much of data, it might not be good idea to just roll every 2 minutes. You might have to increase the roll interval, but on heavy systems 2 minutes is good enough, but roll count and roll size has to be much higher value. Okay, so this is how the Flume works. We have demonstrated end to end. We can now stop logs .sh, which will stop the logs, and also we can actually kill the agent. Once we kill the agent, and once we hit this, and the kill will be graceful kill. So whatever is captured till that point will be written to the final HDFS file. Now you don't see any .tmp files because Flume agent is killed, and you can see all the messages by using cat command. So these are all REST responses, and you have to pass through these messages to make some sense out of it. Okay, if you see here, it is saying there is a transaction on department apparel. Sorry, let me connect to MySQL here. So now we are getting the data from weblogs also, and we already have data in our tables. So using the data from weblogs and the data in tables, you can perform some advanced level of analytics. Okay, use retail underscore DB, select star from departments. So apparel is one of the departments. So this transaction is for department apparel. So if you want to see how many visitors are coming and checking for products for different departments, and if you want to run analytics out of it, you can do that. And also it is actually generating some IPs also here. You have to understand the structure of this data, and based on the information it is providing, you can come up with some solutions using our big data system. Okay, it's just to simulate how to get the data from weblogs and get into HDFS, and then you have to understand this data, and then you have to make the decision. I'm not sure about Apple WebKit. It might mean something, so we have to explore what this Apple WebKit. If you want to see which browsers are actually being used to place the orders, so you can actually pass this string and see whether the transaction is coming from Chrome or Safari or both. So there can be many other things which you can do. So first you have to understand the structure of this, and then you have to start processing the data. Okay. Once the data is integrated to HDFS. That being said, that's it about Flume. It's very straightforward tool, as long as you understand the architecture, and also you understand that there are different source types, channel types, and sync types are available, and for each of the source types, channel types, sync type, the parameters can be significantly different. As long as you know that you can go to the documentation and you can use it as reference, that is more than enough. Okay, and the only thing is Flume is a tool which can get data from the weblogs integrated to HDFS, and after that you have to use your own tool to process the data in HDFS. Okay, and another common design where Flume is being used is Flume to Storm and then to HDFS. So I am not going to cover Storm in this class, or even I might cover as part of Big Data Engineer class, or I might not. It depends upon the content that comes up when I actually start developing the content. In next 3-4 weeks, it will be clear. So another design, common design when it comes to Flume is to integrate data to Storm and then to HDFS. So you need to understand the relevance of the Storm in those designs. So sometimes out of this streaming data, say we are actually streaming every 2 minutes to HDFS, or every 30 seconds from channel to the sink. So using this streaming data, we might be able to determine certain analytics. One classic example is LinkedIn. Okay, when I go to the LinkedIn, if you go to the profile and if you go to the endorsements, okay, so if any of you endorse me, I might not see the information as part of the report immediately. Okay, but it has to be happen as quickly as possible. Okay, so what we can do in such cases, I'm not sure what LinkedIn is using. LinkedIn is using Kafka to get the data from the weblogs, and then probably they might be using Storm or some other tool. So even before pushing data to HDFS, we should aggregate the data and store that aggregated data into the NoSQL table, which provides this report. Okay, so in this case, if I have to design this LinkedIn endorsements section, I will create two collections or two tables. One table will have I'm saying, when I said table or collection, I'm talking about NoSQL, not the regular RDBMS. So if I have a NoSQL table, it will store the information as key value pairs. Key will be my email ID or account ID for LinkedIn, and value will be endorsements, each endorsement. Okay, and for each endorsement there will be the technology that is being endorsed and the endorsee's name. Okay, so here I have so LinkedIn caps it at 50 endorsements. A person can have only up to 50 different endorsements. They cannot have more than 50. So for my key, there can be up to 50 50 technologies, and for each technology there can be multiple endorsees. Okay, that information will be stored in one collection or one NoSQL table, and then that is to store the operations. So whenever someone endorses me, it has to be stored in a durable data structure, which is a NoSQL table or collection. But to view, whenever someone goes to my profile and when they want to view, that information has to be aggregated for each technology. How many endorsements are there, and for the top 10 endorsements, or first 10 endorsements which are being displayed, who are the first 10 or 20 endorses. I don't know how many are displayed here. Whatever is the number, who are those, has to be displayed as quickly as possible. Okay, so for that the data has to be aggregated, and that aggregation should happen as quickly as possible. 1 or 2 minutes or even 5 minutes delay is acceptable. Okay, so now when you endorse, if the data has to go through HDFS, and then if people start processing the data from HDFS every 5 minutes, it is not very good design. In those scenarios, Storm comes into picture. So data will be pushed. So in this case, there will be multiple web servers which might be supporting the endorsements, and those web servers data can be collected using Kafka. LinkedIn uses Kafka to collect the data from the weblogs. They don't use Flume. They collect data from the weblogs, and they know what is being happening in last 1 minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever the role, whatever interval they take. and for that data that is being generated in that 1 minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever threshold they set, instead of pushing data to HDFS, they push the data to Storm. Okay, and Storm have the capabilities to look up, to do several things. So as part of the Storm, you can get the data for the endorsements that is being done for already existing data, and then you can actually increment the values and push it into the aggregated table. Okay, so there will be two pipelines. One is to load the data directly into the NoSQL table about for the action endorsement, and then for the action view, when people start viewing the report might not reflect the current exact status. There might be some delay due to the data has to go through the Kafka layer. The messages have to be aggregated for 1 minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, and then it has to go through Storm, and Storm has to execute the logic to update the collection or table which is designed for the aggregation purpose. Aggregation in the sense this view, aggregated view purpose, and then those details will be stored in the aggregated collection or table, and that will be used for the view purpose. So if you think about it, definitely there will be some quality issues, but it will be temporary, and this quality issue is not significant as long as people are seeing correct results for 99% of the time. In this case, if someone visits my profile, this report will be same or correct for 99.999% of time, except if you just endorse me and if you come back to this page, you might not see the see your details immediately. So for example, if you endorse me on Spark and if you come immediately to this page, you might not see your name immediately. You might or you might not see. It depends upon the latency they have defined to aggregate the results. Okay, or they might have designed in different way where the most recent endorsements might be displayed as quickly as possible. So it all depends upon the artificial intelligence they have built around how they want to showcase. But there is a scenario where we get inconsistent results for some time when we use systems like this one. Okay, if they have to use it with traditional RDBMS, then things will not scale up very easily. So they have to compromise a little bit of data consistency to make this scalable applications, and this is the case with not only with the endorsements, even with the recommendation engine with Amazon. You might not get the exact affinity products for a chosen product or for a searched product immediately. If let's say in last 1 minute, lot of people who bought Samsung 55-inch TV bought Harman Kardon music system, it might not reflect immediately in the recommendation engine, but over time it will reflect. After a day or two, you will start seeing Harman Kardon is being purchased with the TV more frequently, and that will be recommended for you. Okay, so that is how it works. You have to compromise a little bit of consistency of your data to make your application scalable, which is fine, which is absolutely fine for systems like endorsements, recommendation engines, etc. But that compromise should not happen for the transactional based systems. Okay. So that being said, the reason why I brought up LinkedIn is as we are coming close to the coming very close to the course closure, I will highly recommend you to go and start endorsing me on the technologies which you feel I am competent as part of this course. And also I will I will request you to provide the recommendation also. Okay, I will also provide the recommendations to you in future, but that being said, you have to at least to show me what you have done, or if you get certified, I will start endorsing you and I will start providing you the recommendations. Without the certifications and without enough practice, I will not be able to endorse you or write the recommendation for you. But for you, if you like the training, as we are coming close to the completion of the course, I am requesting you to endorse me on the relevant technologies and also write the recommendation. Okay, so the recommendations, I think I will take one of the examples. Okay, so if I have to write the recommend, I am showing how to write the recommendation in LinkedIn. Endorsements, you can just click on endorse, and then it will ask what are the most frequently used skills. So don't use this, rather scroll down and go to this section and select whatever you want to endorse and click on these plus buttons. Okay, and on top of that, if you want to provide the recommendation, you can expand this one, click on recommend, and you can provide the recommendation. Okay, so just recommend me how the training went. It will help me a lot to reach out to more audience in future. So please provide the recommendation here. And if there is any correction required, I will ask. But please give your please recommend me based upon your thoughts. Okay, some people asks me to provide the text, and they would like to add it whatever I have provided, and I don't want to do that. Please write whatever is in your mind, and you can choose the relationship here. As relationship could be with IT Varsity, you can say with IT Varsity, and then here you can choose. Yeah, this is the one which you have to choose, founder and technology evangelist at IT Varsity LLC. And then, okay, it is about you. This is about you. Whatever you are now, you can choose that one, and then choose my role. My role should be founder and technology evangelist, IT Varsity LLC. And relationship, let me see the relationship. Yeah, so relationship, you can actually say you were Peraju's mentor, teacher, students. No, not this one. You can choose your client of me. Okay. Here also they should have you were Peraju's student. I don't know why they haven't defined here. Only they are letting the teacher and mentor uh, relationship to the students rather than the other way around. Anyway, you can just say you were a client of my name. You will see my name. You can just say you were a client of my name, and then choose your title. So if you want to, right now I am founder and technology evangelist at IT Varsity LLC, and I have relationship with Per Raju for his current company. So I am using that one, and then when I click send, the recommendation will come to me. Okay, so take your time and make sure you endorse and also provide the recommendation. So let me know if you have any questions about Flume, and yeah, and if we don't have any questions, we will wrap up quickly today. As part of the next class, we will look for Uzi, and also I'm trying to ask few people who already have experience currently to share their experience as part of couple of sessions. Either I will conduct that session this week or next week, either on Saturday this week or next week, depending upon the availability of their time. It will be 30-minute or 45-minute session, not more than 45 minutes, where the candidate will try to explain his experience and also try to bring some more new stuff to you. Probably he might demonstrate on AWS, EMR, or something else. Okay, so he will be sharing about his experience. That video will not be recorded because he will be showing his cluster and all those things, and you also don't record anywhere those videos. Because we will be sharing some important information. It's not highly confidential information, but it's very important for the company he is working for, and you should not publish those details outside. Okay, so don't record that video when we actually give the presentation. Any other questions you have? Okay. So one more thing is I forgot to send the invitation for today's class. For next class, I will send the invitation because the course is supposed to be officially end as part of the last week itself. But as we were slowed down because of HDFS and MapReduce early, we are delayed little bit, and I forgot to extend it. So I will take care of inviting you for the next class and also for the presentation. That's it for now. Okay, so thank you very much. Have a good night. We will catch up as part of the next class. Thank you. Bye.